the Food Security Act provides is the PDS system. Daily, these people serve around 800 million people, which covers two-thirds of the population of India, targeting and eradicating malnutrition, hunger, poverty, which includes in the SDG Sustainable Development Goals of the World Health Organization. 51% of Indian women make their children drink water before the 6 months, which is not appropriate, and somehow it will affect their child. Till 6 months, it is very mandatory that you need to keep your child on only breastfeeding, even not water. Breastfeeding is not only for growth and development, it ensures that child is prone to fight the infections, to prevent from diseases. We have a food called as ragi ball. They give it for pregnant women, older people. It helps to maintain the blood sugar level. It's made by water, oil or ghee and ragi. It's boiled. It's like a steamed food.
There is a condition called picky eating. Did this condition affect the nutritional state of the childhood?
And the substance abuse, which can relate further, because picky eaters generally go further in their youth age, and as we can see, children's aging 15 years right now are involved into drinking and smoking things, which is very harmful for them. Very nice guideline by Government of India that within 20 meters of any school or educational institution there should be no substance abuse shops. I think today's generation people are only more into fast food, fried food, sugars, beverages, and children are consuming sugary soda beverages at a very young age. Every child should be physically active from young age. They should be getting into sports, playing with their friends. So this will increase the metabolism, and also they'll feel hungry. So they like to have more of home cooked food at that time. So these kind of foods, they help you to replace and maintain your pregnancy, your blood sugar level, insulin level. Even also, it ensures to maintain preeclampsia. These can lead to low birth weights, stillbirth, underweight, obesity for the child, and the very impacting factor. It's a very impacting factor even in the later stages of life of a fetus.
Welcome, Disha. Welcome, Darshika. Darshika, can you tell us about yourself?
So, I'm Darshika Hootra, currently pursuing my final year in Public Health Nutrition, Masters in Public Health Nutrition, and I belong from Chhattisgarh.
You're welcome, Darshika. And Disha, can you tell us about yourself?
Hello, Buran. My full name is Dishan Nayak, and I'm from Bangalore. So, I'm currently pursuing my master's in Pune Symbiosis University, the specialization of Public Health Nutrition, and this is my final semester.
Very good. You welcome also, Disha, to our broadcast. I have a question about our topic today, which is about public nutrition policies.
So basically, public health nutrition is something about improving the nutrition outcomes of any population and the well-being of the population. It can range from national policies to the international policies, as we have many organizations, WHOs, NGOs, which help into this, and basically combating the malnutrition and different kind of things which come back to the malnutrition things.
Very good. And Disha?
So we all know that the word is already written here, public health nutrition. So public focuses on the individual. Health is the health outcome of the people, and nutrition is to ensure they all get the nutritionist food. So the main margin of public health nutrition is to ensure that they all are be provided the nutritionist food so that they can come back from the barriers, such as to come out of the diseases, to reduce the non-communicable diseases, and mainly to improve the financial, people who are going through a lot of financial burden, especially low income countries when we say. So for them, they are not getting good amount of food to eat. So public health nutrition programs and policies ensure that they can help them by providing lot of supplementation and nutritious food, so that the upcoming generations can be healthy. So it can also help prevent them from the communicable and non-communicable diseases.
It's like healthy population, or the outcome, it will be a healthy generation.
Yes. But you need to differentiate between the healthy outcomes and the NCDs things.
NCDs.
Yes, if we are eating good amount of food, so tomorrow that good amount nutrition will go to the fetus. So they will have good and healthy growth and development. So this is how the generation starts. A vicious cycle. A fetal origin vicious cycle of consuming good amount of healthy food.
And this, Disha, make me ask you about one more question, which is about how does the maternal nutrition during pregnancy can affect the fetus development and lifelong health?
Maternal nutrition is the foundation for the child. So if the fetus is getting good nutrition from the mother, so that helps them for a good physical development and cognitive development. So it's not only the food, even also the supplementation of what they are consuming. So this is one of the basic thing that is required for the fetus is the healthy, nutritious food and supplementation, especially in for the pregnant woman, and also it also continues to lactating woman.
Lactating woman.
Yes.
Yeah. And you, Darshika, what do you think?
Actually, I feel when we talk about maternal nutrition, a term comes into our mind which is FOAD. FOAD stands for fetal origins of adulthood disease. So it talks about the developmental plasticity. The nutrition at the time of preconception and periconception is the most important because it can lead to a brief kind of NCDs later into life of the fetus. Even these can lead to low birth weights, stillbirth, underweight, obesity for the child. And the very impacting factor. It's a very impacting factor even in the later stages of life of a fetus.
Yes, it's all about nutrition. But
Even
you
after
know,
birth.
nutrition, like there is so many type of nutrition include like macronutrient, micronutrient.
Yes.
In your opinion or in your experience, both of you, which type of micronutrient is most essential, most important for the pregnancy woman?
Think iron and folic acid. Today, if you see every scenario across the world, first supplementation that is recommended for pregnant women is iron and folic acid. So folic acid basically it improves for the neural development of the child, and iron it ensures to prevent anemia in both mothers and the fetus, so that the child can also have good birth, like ensure that there is no stillbirth, or even can prevent from low birth weights of the child that is happening. So even to ensure that preterm births can also be prevented if they are consuming good iron and folic acid supplementation during pregnancy.
Nice. Darshika, I read it in one research that folic acid or overdose of folic acid when the pregnant take it will be cause autism. What do you think?
Actually, I feel if we talk from our country's scenario, Indian scenario, this thing is not too much till right now into our space. But the thing is, the governments are mostly towards initiating this IFA supplementation things. Though other micronutrients, macronutrients too affect, if you can see towards calcium thing. If the fetus don't get calcium, the adequate amount of calcium, it starts extracting from the mother's bone, which can lead to osteoporosis because 1/3 requirements are increased during pregnancy, simply. But every immunization has its effect, either it's pertussis, diphtheria, tetanus, anything. It has both side effects plus effects.
Yes. And Darshika, I have more question for you.
No issue.
Yeah, okay. In some, or not in some, in every like government center health for pregnancy, they prescribe vitamin A. What is the reason for that? Vitamin A.
Vitamin A. Actually, vitamin A is the very basic thing, the base laying foundation for the organs and tissue development. As we also know, vitamin A is the most important thing in its retinol and carotene form for the eyes too.
Yes.
It is very important. And for the fetal development, vitamin A is the basic thing. For organ developments like lung, brain, liver, everything, it starts from the vitamin A supplementation only.
Okay. Disha, did you think just folic acid or iron or vitamin E is enough to the pregnancy? Or it should be the good feeding, good dietary nutrient?
I think supplementation is just a small part role. The main role comes from the food. As we know, food is also medicine. Yes. So it also depends on how much consumption of the food the mother is taking. Today, when we see in India, we have certain policies, such as we have a Food Security Act, where they're providing few rations to people, socio income people, because to ensure that they're getting good nutritious food. That can also be helpful. We also have some of the maternal and child government schemes, such as ICDS. So the main focus is not only about the supplementation. Supplementation can also prevent you from becoming anemic, also growth and development, cognitive development of the child for the better ones. But main food also helps to ensure that mother also requires energy. Now, for example, if I am having good food, that will help me to give good milk production to breastfeed my child tomorrow. So it does ensure that food also should be essential as well as how much essential the supplementation is giving.
Disha, what do you think about the cultural food? Did the pregnancy woman get any benefit from cultural food? As you know, there are Indian people from south and Indian people from north, and the culture is different. As you from South India, can you explain?
Before I start from cultural foods, I would like to start from very staple foods that are available in South India. So South and North have different staple foods. So how it happens in South India is, I am from Karnataka, basically from South India. So what happens is there cultural food is safe for every individual. So there's no particular for pregnant women. So we have foods such as ragi, wheat, bajra, jowar. So this is commonly used across the villages, also even in across the cities. So what happens for us, rice is the main staple food. So we require rice every day, and also even for pregnant women also there are certain cultural foods that is replaced. Now, for example, to reduce GDM, so sometimes doctors suggest that they can have jowar roti instead of having rice. They can have some amount of chapati, they can have upma. So these kind of foods, they help you to replace and maintain your pregnancy, your blood sugar level, insulin level. Even also it ensures to to maintain preeclampsia. So all these basic staple food is being consumed across the state, and also it ensures that everybody is healthier. So even ragi is also very healthy staple food. So it helps to maintain the blood sugar, and also it is very rich in calcium.
Yeah, I think it's very good for insulin resistance.
Yes.
Yes.
So like we have a food called as ragi ball. So this they give it for pregnant women, older people. It helps to maintain the blood sugar level.
What is the ingredient of ragi?
It's made by water, oil, or ghee, and ragi. It's boiled. Like a steamed food that we consume with sambar, vegetables, sambar, mixed vegetables. So whatever we eat every day, it's all about green vegetables or vegetable food. Most of the time in South India, it is consumed as I would say it is consumed in the form of sambar or any kind of sabzi. So this is the main staple food what we eat, and I think it is recommended the same way for the pregnant woman also. There's nothing special that is recommended. With that, doctors also recommend some of the supplementation. So this helps the pregnant woman to be healthy, and there are no much prevalence of there becoming deficiencies. I have not seen while they consume healthy cultural food in South India. Very rare, like so low socio income or villages cases are seen.
Good. This is in the South India.
Yeah.
And in North India, Darshika.
Actually, I feel that either you talk about South India or you talk about North India. The thing is, every culture is different. They have their different beliefs at the same time, that at what time we need to feed something different to a pregnant woman. If you will look towards North India, there also rice is no doubt in my state, it's the most staple diet. But the form it is being consumed, it is different. Obviously, the thing is, if you give a dal roti and something kind of thing to a South Indian people and a spicy food to South Indian people, they won't accept. And if you give a very bland kind of food, a very simple food, the North Indian won't accept those things. But from a public health point of view, when you distribute these foods in an humanitarian crisis form, the thing is, people have so many myths at this time that regarding the pregnancy, most of time, and breastfeeding, people think that the milk is not that much appropriate for the infant, that it might lack few things, and they start making them complementary feeding or making them drink water. Even 51% of Indian women make their children drink water before the 6 months, which is not appropriate, and somehow it will affect their child. Somehow it will affect, no doubt, because as per our guidelines, till 6 months, it is very mandatory that you need to keep your child on only breastfeeding, even not water. But after 6 months, you need to start. But some people give these things. So while when you distribute these things from public health point of view in an humanitarian crisis too, you need to mind their cultural preferences. You can't incorporate some new food at that time. You need to look towards their cultural preferences. Like if the person is comfortable with rice, you need to give rice. If they're comfortable with wheat, you need to give wheat. Simple.
But the only thing is, if it's coming to lactating, I have a small point to say. So, what in our Indian culture people do is once they introduce the complementary feeding to children after 6 months, so they stop inappropriately breastfeeding the child. So, this is one reason of malnutrition, that the child is not getting good nutrients. So, usually it is very important that even after 6 months, the breastfeed should be continued up to 2 years to ensure it has a very good growth and development, and to ensure, because breastfeeding is not only for growth and development, it ensures that the child is prone to fight the infections, to prevent from diseases. So this is one thing that all over the country, not only India, people should understand that it is very important to breastfeed the child.
For 6 months, just breastfeeding.
From 0 to 6 months, it is compulsory without introducing any food.
Food, yes.
So once you introduce the food after 6 months, it should be ensured that it is continued up to the age of 2 years.
2 years.
Actually, breastfeeding acts like an first immunization. The bestest immunization will be breastfeeding. The mother's milk, the colostrum milk, the bestest immunization.
Yeah, I think it's very nice topic, and I want to ask you more question and more question. Okay, from Indian point of view, what are the scenario for the malnutrition?
Actually, from the Indian point of view, in today's era, the thing is, as we can see, India is facing triple burden of malnutrition. The triple burden of malnutrition will compromise of firstly undernutrition, then micronutrient deficiencies, and at the last overnutrition. It is believed that the developing nations which are developing, they have low amount of undernutrition, but they are increasing with overnutrition things. Overnutrition, no doubt, simultaneously relates with the NCDs. It will relate. So, in Indian point of view, the more it's obesity things which are coming into pace, and the obesity will lead directly to the NCDs like diabetes, hypertension, hypercholesteremia, and so many more.
Basically, when we see undernutrition is connected with micronutrition deficiency. So this is basically seen for children who are below 5 years. So what happens? The child is undernourished because of improper nutrition, which is impacting growth and development. So this leads into malnutrition. So that can again, that can connect to be where the child can be at least he can get wasted or stunted. But what happens in overnutrition is people are getting too much food to eat. Like this is when we see today in urbanization, for example, we see there's a lot of sedentary lifestyle where they are working parents, children are eating a lot of junk food. So this is again leading them into overweight, obesity. They have no control in eating. So they're not getting nutritious food. So this is again what is happening. It is further leading them into non-communicable diseases such as diabetes, hypertension, again future thyroid. So this is one of very important to know that triple burden malnutrition is impacting not only India but everywhere across the world, because urbanization is one of the reason for it. And today I think today's generation people are only more into fast food, fried food, sugars, beverages, and children are consuming sugary soda beverages at a very young age, and there's no physical activity. So one reason for childhood obesity is improper physical activity, and it is very important that every child should be physically active from young age. They should be getting into sports, playing with their friends. So this will increase the metabolism, and also they'll feel hungry. So they like to have more of home cooked food at that time.
even at this point, I want to correlate one of our incident. We visited to one of the Tara mobile crash recently. The observation, what we observed there was, it was a labor camp simply. 4 people living in just 4 by 4 house made of tin, very unhygienic place, very dirty. The thing was, the parents go to work, they drop their children into crashes. At that time, what happens is they have very less money, their very financial constraints are there. So the thing is, the children are consuming, minimum 5 packets of chips and kurkure daily.
5 packets. Oh.
Because minimum 5 packets daily.
It's a labor camp. Like, they don't have access of anything. There are small stores, small vegetable stores. So the thing is, parents go in the morning, they come in the evening. They just cook food one time.
Even the main reason was not about cooking too. We can say the main reason was the financial constraint. Their energy demands were meeting because of the trans fat content into that high sugary things. But they're not understanding what could be the future implications of that. We understand that thing, but those people are singing just as an alternative food which can fulfill their energy requirements.
Therefore, it's your responsibility to educate the parent first
That's what-
and the child.
It is very important to give behavioral change, whether it is low social income or even if they're in sedentary lifestyle. Because today working parents also, they feel they're not giving importance to children. They all know what is healthy, what is good, what is bad. But education is very important for all the parents to tell them that this is bad and this is good.
Yes, but Disha, during your explanation, you and Darshika, there is 2 questions come to my mind. I want to ask you. One of them, during pregnancy, some women have diabetes. Did you think this diabetes state will affect the fetus in future?
Definitely. Actually,
There is possibility get the diabetes type 1.
this type 1 is gestational diabetes. This actually takes place in second trimester, third trimester. So what happens when we are having improper insulin in our body? So what that happens, it should be maintained in a very before delivery. If that is not delivered, then there is a chances of the child getting into type 1 diabetes. So it is basically, I would say today, I was also bachelorate in clinical nutrition. So I used to get a lot of GDM patients. So one thing I observed is it was not their hormonal changes. One reason was the eating pattern. So they were more into eating fast foods. They were having more of only sugary foods, excess than required. So their improper balance of nutrition is leading them to GDM. So it is very important that even if the gestational diabetes is not controlled, one of the reasons for it is also preeclampsia. So it is very important that and also pregnant women, it is important for them to have a basic physical activity like walking, at least not doing work. Second trimester up till third trimester, at least they have to have some physical activity such as basic walking. So this helps them to reduce the insulin resistance, also increase body metabolism. So they have to maintain the sugar level, especially when they're in third trimesters, or else there are chances that the child can be type 1 diabetic.
The other question is about how does the malnutrition in early childhood impact the cognitive and the physical development in the children?
The main 2 pillars of malnutrition are stunting and wasting, we all know. It's a kind of a vicious cycle. A underweight baby is born, then it goes to underweight adolescent girl, which will go towards the underweight kind of a stunted kind of a mother, which will again give birth to an underweight baby. Simply, it's a vicious cycle. So the main thing in the Indian scenario, we need to break this cycle. You know that the wasting, according to World Health Association, wasting decreases a country's GDP by 3%. A country's GDP by 3%. And even a person who is stunted loses 1.3% of its growth compared to a normal person, leading to financial constraints again. They won't be able to feed their family and creating a bigger malnutrition things. So if we want to start if we need to break this vicious cycle, we need to go from the breastfeeding things, from the very early initiation, even not from the breastfeeding, we can say from the fetal origins, as we discussed, from the developmental plasticity and the developmental nutritions, the pregnancy nutritions, and everything as we go phase by phase. This is the only thing which we can go through.
Disha, there is a condition called picky eating during the childhood. What do you think, or did this condition affect the nutritional state of the childhood?
I think this word picky eater, it is a threat for overall global countries. So I would say that basically when it comes from childhood, we can see from toddlers. So they are very much choosy in eating food. They want particular food. They don't want particular food. So what happens at that moment of time? Today we see that parents don't force much, children to eat their food. So they just give them whatever they like, and they just tell them to control them that okay, you have this food for their satisfaction. But it is very important to understand that picky eaters can further lead them into different, kind of outcomes. So, in order to prevent that, it is very important that the parents should ensure to prepare colorful, delicious food, especially in childhood for toddlers and school-going children, so that they should not feel that they should get an option to, choose any. Instead of that, they should make the meal very interesting, colorful, delicious, the fragrance. As soon as the child sees the food, they should feel very attracted with the healthy food. So this is one way to prevent the pricky eaters. I think there are many developed countries which is actually following this. But in undeveloped country, especially in urbanization, it is very difficult to control because children are very choosy. So today they rather choose to eat chips and chocolates than eating
Home cooked foods.
home cooked foods.
Yeah.
So this is one of the reason of picky eaters.
And Deshika, what do you think
I
about
feel
this?
about the picky eaters, the main thing which comes into place is behavioral changes. The main thing is the kind of school campaigns you can go with, school campaigns or nutritional education. The main who comes into pictures are the teachers and the parents. The canteen things. If we will introduce healthy canteen menu, even there's a guideline so that children don't go into substance abuses, that in 20 meters of any school or colleges there should be no shop of any substance abuse thing, either it's alcohol, smoking, or anything. And the substance abuse which can relate further, because picky eaters generally go further in their youth age, and as we can see, children's aging 15 years right now are involved into drinking and smoking things, which is very harmful for them and their future things and future outcomes. So there's a very nice guideline by Government of India that within 20 meters of any school or educational institution, there should be no substance abuse shops.
What does the government initiate for any program related to the nutrition?
Actually, if we talk about any program to the nutrition, actually any program we can talk about, the steps are almost same. It could go from basic plannings. First, you need to identify the problem, the stakeholders area which are present there. Then you need to design the solutions, designing the implementation. In this process, you also need to do some kind of a pilot testing thing, that if you're initiating a IFA supplementation, but what more basis you are initiating that, you need to assess those things in a small group, that either your program is working on then or not. Then you need to go with the budget analysis thing. How much budget you need to give for cost estimations, public tracking systems, everything. After that, when the program is going, the stakeholders are involved, FT program ones are involved, and then comes into places monitoring and evaluation. So monitoring is something you can do at the time when the program is going, and so that the stakeholders can know that the planning goals are reached till what level. And during evaluation, evaluation is not necessary that it should be go into this process only, but evaluation can be done, either it could be individually done for any of the program, to know basically till what things you have achieved the success of your program. If you have just made a target that we want to combat poverty by 80%, so you need to evaluate it, that to know that how much success it has reached. Either it's you're thinking it's 80%, but it has reached only 40%, so the program was a fail now.
Yes, right.
That's what to, how the government processes is this way.
And they also have some researchers. Like it just cannot implement without the help of researchers. For that, they have some process. First, they have to prepare. They have to take some of the data collection. They have to take a target group of people. So by doing the data collection, they will get the number of people of whoever were their target. Then they have to do their assessment. So after their assessment, they have to plan and design what is the target they are planning and what is the solution they need. Then after that, again they'll have to do the monitoring where they have to check what are the inputs, outputs. So what, how, if their data is right. Because if a researcher is taking any data, for example, if I'm taking from malnutrition, I have to ensure that I have to take the consultant form because that is the rules. So if they do not sign the consultant form, people, if they're not interested, then I cannot process it. So seeing all the inquiries, they have to monitor it and then they have to evaluate. They should ensure that that evaluation should be marked up to the results what they're taking. So after that only they'll be able to take up these steps and again they'll can implement. After the implementation is done, the government, they put that scheme. They check if that scheme is working on people. So if it is good enoughly working on people, they will proceed it through ministries, departments, and again, they'll start, initiating it. And then again, if it is not working, that they'll check themselves and they'll improve it. So this is how government schemes run.
Actually, the thing is, the thing which you write on paper and what is the reality is very different.
Different, yes.
It is very different. If you write that I want to do these things, these are my things, but it should be fitted to their cultural backgrounds,
Yeah.
geographical
There are
backgrounds,
so many challenges,
socio-economic backgrounds, financial backgrounds. So many things you need to point out. So just writing don't means that. You need to go through a system.
And budget analysis is very important.
Important in this.
Very
yes.
important.
Because budget analysis, it helps you to analyze what is the cost, then analyze the budget. Then again, it ensures that that budget should be, again gone to the departments, ministries. There are certain policies, to check if that budget is working with them. So analyzing the budget is very important if we are going with government schemes, because this is mainly scheme is for the low socio-income people, because who are not providing, who are not able to afford money for food. They're not able to afford money. Unemployment is there. So the main scheme for the government to clear is budget analysis.
Even what happens due to corruption, the thing is, the ones who don't deserve those benefits, they get those benefits, and the one who deserves, they won't get.
And today also we see there are a lot of government schemes which are there in India, no doubt in that. There are a lot of government schemes which have also improved a lot of people's life. So that is played, it is very played a major important role, especially when you go with maternal and child health, even older people also. So now we can see there are pensions that have been given for older people. They also give, some of the scheme amount of money for maternal and health child. So government, in today Indian scenario, I would say that government has improved a lot of people by providing them good schemes.
Okay, Darshika. There is one more question. What is the point of view of immunization of Indian scenario?
Nowadays, it's one of the most favorite topic. I'm generally saying it's one of my most favorite topic nowadays, because as we told that we are in our final semesters and we are processing through our dissertation studies. So my topic is on assessing the first 1,000 days of life, the universal immunization program with my guide, Dr. R.T. Moole ma'am, our professor. The objective of immunization is preventing the diseases which can occur later into life stages. For this thing, the first 1,000 days of life, right from the conception period till the first 1,000 days, means till 2 years, it is very important so that a child gets immunized. Immunization even, prevents 36% of deaths. And even when immunization is incorporated with breastfeeding, it prevents more 6%. Means around 40 to 50% of diseases can be prevented through immunization.
So basically, we know, as she said earlier, right now while we were speaking, that immunization even can prevent deaths. The major part here is it spreads through basically if you're having poor hygiene, if you're having communicable diseases and viruses and parasites. So it is very important that every individual should take immunization in order to prevent the diseases. As well as we can see that we do have certain government schemes that are supporting for immunization, such as we can see now, we can see Anganwadi workers. They are, they ensure that the child is immunized by, they give them the card and they ensure that they're immunized on time. And also we can see PMCs are helping. So I think when we see in Indian scenario, immunization, I think today most of the Indians are immunized, and we can see that there are very less communicable diseases that are spreading across, until and unless we see in low socio-economic status people, until and unless they're into being into prone to the viruses and infections.
Not only the people who are getting immunized are involved. The main thing who are involved are the health workers, doctors, nurses. Because if you don't have the right knowledge to immunize, you can't immunize. There is some kind of a vital while monitor on immunization, a color code. If the color code darkens, you can't immunize after a time using that vaccine. It presents that the vaccine is expired. So immunization can be expected through or can be affected through various factors, like it can be through socioeconomic statuses, and because the less people, the less financial constraints, sorry, just a second, as the people will have more financial constraints, they won't believe that much into immunization due to their cultural beliefs and all those things. In India, there is one of the card known as Mamta card, MCP card, we say that thing. So it is given to every child. The things, there are 15, 16 vaccinations. Every vaccination they get, they just tick a mark, a tick in front of that vaccination, and it is said as vaccinated because it's been mandatory. But when you go to a private hospital, there are more number of vaccines. So it also creates disparities between poor and rich people.
Disha, there are so many international organizations like UNICEF and WHO that have programs to improve health outcome. Can you give us some brief explanation?
Actually, we know, basically, before I start this, I'll just give a small introduction of WHO and how UNICEF are collaborated. So we know that World Health Organization, basically, it was located from Geneva, Switzerland. So UNICEF and WHO collaborated each other. So WHO ensures that they prevent even the diseases. They help people during crisis, like whether it is flood or any kind of difficult crisis, whether it's climate changes or wars. So what is the role of UNICEF here is they ensure that mainly on maternal and child nutrition here. So they ensure that all the child nutrition is being focused, and especially when we are having these kind of crisis, so they help the child to get good nutrition. Not only the crisis, even when it comes to a lot of low socioeconomic countries. So these are the two international organizations which is collaborated globally all over the world. So they help to focus on nutrition and health of every individual, and UNICEF mainly focuses on the child nutrition. How to improve not only the nutrition as well as child education. So, they promote more of improving the child's health and well-being. So I would like to give one example here. Recently, I had a study which I did presentation of developed and undeveloped country. So in that, I found that African countries are the most, they are more prone to malnutrition, such as stunting. So as we know that the Japan today stands in 2.3% of stunting, that is the lowest rate of stunting across the globe. So that is because, they ensure that there is equal amount of nutrition which is being provided for both the vulnerable as well as the high income groups. So some policies like Shokyoku policy that ensure that everybody gets the all good amount of nutrition meals that has been consumed. And some policies such as where Japan gives them lunch programs where the child ensure that they have given healthy lunch in the schools. They're provided with all the nutritionist food. And one of the programs such as Sun, as well as also they have this food system surveillance from the government where they ensure that all the equity of the food should be given equally to all the kind of group of people. So this is how the Japan has, developed themselves to improve malnutrition, health outcomes, as well as, give good and proper growth and development for children. And when it comes to Africa, it is very known that Africa has a very low finance income in the country. So there are a lot of poor people and there's a lot of unemployment. So I took up one country, that was Kenya, and Kenya has more than 42 million children who are malnourished across the African country, and probably 20-30 million children were malnourished there in initial time when I just saw a report. So what happens in Kenya, there are certain malnutrition policies which supported them also, such as Imam. So Imam is one of them, where they ensure that acute malnutrition prevention is done by providing nutrition programs, by giving them supplementary feeding, complementary feeding to children, and also wash techniques, such as wash is nothing but water, sanitation, and hygiene technique. So if they can have good sanitation and hygiene, it can be ensured that they can improve themselves to prevent themselves from the communicable diseases. As well as some of the school program providing them free meals in the schools through the government initiatives, and also international national organizations. So these are some of the policies that help all the countries to improve. And the baseline here is WHO and UNICEF. The main baseline for this is WHO and UNICEF. That is, that is like, it is the root of all of this that is helping them to come out of these.
Nice. Now, Darshika, we came to last question, and I will ask you, how can Darshika, how can like public-private partnership improve the access to fortified food in underserved communities?
Actually, taking her answer only to the forward notes, this she discussed about WHO, UNICEF, and the programs which she discussed. Either it can be from the developed country or developing countries. But the thing is, until and unless WHO won't collaborate with the government, the programs won't work out properly. So the one of the policy which she described of the Japan, which is SUN, which is scaling up nutrition. So it is scaling up the interventions and those investments from World Health Associations, WHOs. So the government of Japan collaborates with WHO, taking these funds and everything. But sometimes what happens in this, it comes one transition phase. What happens? The countries which are not even rich, they take funds and funds, which shows that they are rich. But at a point when their GDP is reached to an appropriate level, they need to return those funds. Like for this, one example is Pakistan, even whose GDP is reached. They are taking up funds. They are showing that they are improved and they have eradicated malnutrition, but the things are not going so on. So it should be going very nicely. Public and private partnerships are very necessary for any of the policy implementation.
And coming to fortified food, if I speak in Indian scenario, we have this Food Security Act. So this ensures to give fortified food for the people of marginalized group. Like they fortify food with locally available food such as rice, wheat, or grains, to improve the nutritional status, as well as it can be easily accessible to people here. So I think this Food Nutrition Act is very important role in India, as they help all the group of people to consume certain food which they are not able to afford. So by consuming these fortified foods through locally available food, this is one reason how people of Indians are able to improve their nutritional status.
Here now, the main role which the Food Security Act provides is the PDS systems, food distribution systems, public distribution systems. So daily, these people serve around 800 million people, which covers 2/3 of the population of India, targeting and eradicating malnutrition, hunger, poverty, which includes in the SDG, Sustainable Development Goals of the World Health Organizations.
And this works with the process like, they need and proof. Like they cannot just easily just come and give it to you freely. So to provide these, they will have to give you some of your identity card to show that you belong from marginalized groups such as Aadhaar card. So when this is provided, then they give you a subsidies of food or rations, whatever it is. So due to this, then it is easily available. Like today we can see there are some of the rations which is given for 2 rupees, like wheat, rice, and everything, monthly for people. So this is how, this works. Like even though if they're in partnership, they just cannot go distribute. So they have to follow some rules and regulation. They have to show their identity card, their proof, and then that should be, accepted by the government to say that okay, they belong from this group, and then only this policy is applied to them.
Disha and Darshika, thank you to being with us today. Thank you for your valuable time. Disha, do you have anything? Do you have any advice for the Indian people?
So, coming to a small advice for pregnant women, I would like to say that all the pregnant women should ensure in an Indian scenario that they start consuming their iron, folic acid supplementary as well as healthy home cooked food. They should ensure that whatever food they're eating, it should be having, vegetable, at least a fruit in a day, rice, dal, chapati, and also they should consume milk for good, healthy milk production. So I think they have to consume all the basic food requirements that is required for their body. And I'm sure that today we can see that people are very prone about their weight. So they should not, show more importance to their weight management during pregnancy. So they should ensure that they should have all the healthy food that is available for them, and even the supplementation, and also they should ensure that they have to go to their routine checkups regularly. So this will help them for a healthy, fetal development, as well as their healthy outcome as being a lactating mother, and also growth and development of the child.
Yes. And Darshika,
And lastly, though, we will thank you for calling us here.
you're welcome.
Very much.
I'm
Thank
really
you for this
enjoying
very nice
this
platform.
broadcast, and with high knowledge of
Yes.
for you, Disha and Darshika.
And the last advice will be this only, that nutrition is the best medicine you can get. Even immunization or even any disease prevention, any kind of injections, until and unless you don't incorporate nutrition into lifestyle, nothing will be working out.
And it was a very interesting session with you, Burhan, today.
You're welcome, Disha. Even I'm enjoying with you, Disha and Darshika.
Yes.
Yeah.